from you. Look, this is really great. Steve, I know, we're over the top now. We have more than 2,000. I'm sure some of you, before the day is over or the weekend is over, you're going to really make it your museum, our museum. I'm proud of the fact that we can keep this thing going. I hope that in about 100 years, when we're all gone, somebody is the caretaker, and Daryl's going to come back and make sure all the sets work, along with Chuck and company. So thank you for your generosity. And now, Lloyd, it's a tough act to follow.
Okay, my presentation will be short and sweet today. So, as Steve mentioned before, Dwight Smith all of a sudden yesterday was on his way, or started out of town, and he had to be rushed to the hospital. And I've talked to him 8 or 10 times since then. They do not know what's wrong with him, and it sounds like some very serious situations. But anyway, he has my slide presentation that was going to go on for you to look at while I'm talking. So you'll have to endure just my talking, and I'm sorry for that. But anyway, it won't take but just a few minutes. I want to thank Steve for inviting us to talk to you about our museum. Obviously, you've seen Steve's museum. How many of you have been to the Museum of Radio and Technology in Huntington? Okay. For those who have been there, it speaks for itself. The Museum of Radio and Technology, its very name, is all-encompassing. And until somebody disputes me on this, we obviously are going to claim we're the largest radio and technology museum in the world. And we cover a variety of themes, and of course the main being radio. History is on display. A man's greatest invention is its center stage. Radio helped shape America at the turn of the 20th century and continues that tradition into the 21st century, obviously. The museum presents the advent of radio, from the crystal sets, the spark gap transmitter, to the organized radio and television studio. Is all on display in our museum. Television, the great invention, encompassed in this dedicated and wonderful museum that you all are here to see today. We do not go into the depths of television as Steve has in his, and there's little reason to do that with the museums just about 150 miles apart. So, but we do to the computer age, and we include, as many of you know, as he was showing here with the television, the radio tubes were used in the early televisions, and so were radio tubes used in the early computers. Some of the computers were bigger than this room that didn't have the computing power of my wristwatch. So the radio tube wound up in everything. Also included in our museum, we have a Gilbert toy collection, and some of you say, well, why would you have that there? Well, most of you my age all grew up with the Gilbert toys, the Erector sets, the chemistry sets, American Flyer trains. And the nice thing about those toys were you could play with them and listen to the radio. So you didn't sit there in front of the television today like the kids do today with their thumbs are running these Wii games and iPods and ePods and APods and all of that kind of stuff. We're just about potted out. My grandkids have got so many pods and Wii's and computers logged onto my wireless system, which they're next door, that I sometimes wonder why the thing doesn't blow up. But in any event, it's a whole different, and there's a reason for this. We do try to have a variety of things in the museum. however small, to be attractive for people who might not just be radio minded. And there are a few wives, few girlfriends who just don't see what we see in collecting these old radios and televisions. So, you know, we try to have a little something there for everybody. And it has worked very, very well for us. As you go and move through the museum, you move from one theme to the other. We have a complete collection, for example, of CB radios, World War II Communications Center. By the way, we have the first television camera that was used at the World's Fair in 1939 in New York. There were two cameras, I think. I'm not the expert in this area. One was used when they cut the ribbon to open the World's Fair out the Empire State Building, which you saw those clowns sitting up there on top of that sucker, building that antenna like they were having back to the Empire State Building via coax and out to the people who own TV sets, which I'm not sure how many own TV sets, but wouldn't have been a whole lot. So we have that camera is on display in our museum. We have added the West Virginia Broadcasters Hall of Fame, and that has been, were started in West Virginia, wound up as national figures, from Soupy Sales to, you know, just dozens of them. So that has been a great addition to our museum, and that's something, you know, we have a television broadcasters museums. It's nice if you can have them all in one place. Like, it'd be nice if Steve could have the Broadcasters Hall of Fame for television at his museum, but it takes a lot of room to do those type of things. Radio and television museums, such as what Steve has here and what we have a big advantage over traditional local historical museums that struggle to survive, where they just have a local theme for some famous one person or what have you. The radios and televisions that we have in our museums, the RCAs, the Philcos, so on and so forth, not only were owned locally by people, but the same model, the same set was owned by somebody in Oakland, California, or Seattle, Washington, or New York City. So when they come to the museum, they say, oh, that's the set we had in our living room. So we have a common theme that carries through from the local to the national scene. Our greatest challenges with museums, and we were just down here in Hilliard at their local museum, and the gentleman there was expressing the same thing, is of having curators and younger people who will become involved in these historical endeavors. As you can look around the room, we do have some medium-aged people here, but most of us are getting older, and old, you know, 12, 16, 20-year-old involved in these type of hobbies. Every generation collects and maintains those things that they have grown up with, leaving older collections wanting for conservators, and that's us. They take care of us in nursing homes and throw our artifacts out, but we've got to figure a way to at least get them to keep the artifacts. They can throw us out, but we gotta keep the artifacts in place. As a member of the West Virginia Association of Museums, this has become a major concern across the entire historical spectrum, and we discuss this every year. We just had our statewide conference in March, and it's the center of conversation at every meeting. And we find all these nice little historical sites, and there's 4 or 5 people that are involved, and they've gotten tens of thousands of dollars of funding to preserve this, whatever it is, log cabin or what have you. but they don't have anyone to carry. Will become adults and take on community responsibility, intergovernment and industry positions, they begin to factor into the funding process that sustains our efforts. We do not want them to shortchange the historical inventions that have made our present-day technology the wonder it is. Actually, I don't have 2 more pages. I've got just a partial page here. Think about this. Our museum has memberships just as the early television has memberships. Recruit a young person to the hobby. It could be the most important contribution you make to this great preservation effort. If necessary, pay their first-year membership. A good investment with great returns. It may be that just by doing that you will have a whole year of their interest, and then they will become permanently interested in what we're all trying to do. And that's basically my presentation. I wanted to take a few questions. We handed out some rack cards here to you. You can go to our website. It's pretty easy, mrtwv.org. We have tons of pictures. We have 3 meets a year. Our last one was a couple of weeks ago. It's already up on the website. You can see it. And if any of you have any questions, I'll take those from the floor now concerning the museum. Yes, sir. We actually, we do. We have a complete computer display, some of the very early hard drive units, and then we have actual pictures of, of attempts at computers before they actually became electronic. They were mechanical computers. But the minute we get into the electronic end of it, we do have the artifacts themselves. We come right on up through. We got a timeline around the wall so you can see when each, and we go right up through about 1993 when the compact 286 laptop was introduced. That's the one. It's a 7 megabyte hard drive. The kids do get a kick out of that. Drive now at Staples for $395. We tell them, well, here's a 7 megahertz, and it's run by a washing machine motor. You're right, the motor's about the size of a washing machine. We have one, the first 1 gig hard drive, and it weighs close to the weight of the television that he was talking about there. It cost $35,000. And it was a 1 gig. Well, the kids can relate to that because their iPods have got 8 gig or 32 gig in them. Yeah, right along in that area there. Yes, sir. Right. We have the first handheld calculator, which most of it was a consumer products group. The gentleman who invented the chip worked for Texas Instrument. Well, Texas Instrument at that time had no consumer retailing properties. So the company that made their cases for them for some of their test equipment said they would make a case for that calculator. They did so, and then it just so happened that the guy at Bomar called his buddy Bob Craig, who was in the consumer electronics business, and they introduced the first calculator, and we sold that thing for $249. Did 4 functions, and had the little red LEDs about that big in it. So, and we have Lisa. She's there. That was the first computer that Steve Jobs introduced with the mouse. So, but anyway, that's just a small segment of what we try to do. We just try to have this broad appeal, but then for the purist, the radio purist, we can capture his imagination for a whole day if he so desires to study the radio, the history of the radio. And we have a library there, wonderful library, covering every aspect of the electronic history. So if you want to do some research, come there. We have a full-time librarian. A lot of this is on computer, but we have a wonderful library if you want to do some research. Just come down and see us. Anybody else?
This is good.
Thank you all very much, and again, thanks, Steve.
You're a friend of Chuck's. You're under your time. Just let me make one comment. Important. A couple of years back, I stopped off at the Henry Ford Museum, figuring it's a world-class museum. The radios, the television sets, the electronics were garbage compared to what every one of you have in their homes and collections. They don't work. The cabinets are dented. Nothing was working. I felt bad. And then I got to do some work for museums locally in town, and people donate to a museum. They have no idea that the museum, to raise money, is going to trash their collection and sell it. It doesn't get restored. If you're going to leave anything to a major museum, to a library, to a school, try to ask. Very difficult. There are things that are purchased constantly out of museums. I've liquidated good stuff from world-class museums because they didn't want them and they needed the money. Having said that, just let me answer one thing about Julian. You want to know about early computers? In order to pass mathematics at my university in 1951, I had to work in the computer lab for the math professor, and we were building the ENIAC, which took up the whole gymnasium at the university and all of the power in West Philadelphia. Thousands of vacuum tubes. It was doing 1 and 2 bits and bytes back and forth. Nobody knew what the hell it was doing. When I got into the military in the early 50s and I had my top secret clearance, there was a booklet in the filing cabinet showing the trajectory of the first atomic cannon. And that's what they were working on. It took them about a year or two to get the trajectory figured out. And it took up that. That's all I know about early stuff. Now, we're going to enlighten you. Dr. Reinhard Bruch, who is a world-class physics professor, he's got more information in his pinky than you'll ever figure out. I mean, if I were to show you his CV here, which is only a part of it, professor of physics at the major universities in America, in Germany, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, you know what they do out there. Secret stuff you'll never hear about, and the professor knows all about that. Caltech, where I'm helping my granddaughter get a physics degree now, so I know what's going on a little bit. You just can't believe where he's worked in Stanford, University of Arizona, the Max Planck Institute in Germany, which is probably, if you know the name, you know what they do. It's just incredible. What he is researching are words that haven't been invented yet. I can't figure them out. Nanoparticles, quantum dots, nanobioprocessors, liposome drug delivery, all this weird stuff that will eventually keep me living for another 150 years, Doc. So I'm partly bionic, which I'll talk to you about later. But come on up, tell us your brain to ours. You want the handheld or you want the...
It's okay. How do I get to my... and then here I can go forward and back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because I have only not working with the Macintosh.
You want this? Yeah, this is just showing you what's going to be up there, and then the next slide that's going to come up.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then you just arrow.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for this
Lead on,
introduction. Of course, I'm not an expert in your field. You know much more about resistors and these capacitors and these early devices, where I can only admire you for your development which you have done here in the United States, with CBS and RCA. My father was a good friend of Mr. Zworykin and also the general, Mr. Zarnoff, States. I would like, before I start, there came a book out. Unfortunately, it's written in German about my father, but I'm more than happy of information in a lot of literature. I think, unfortunately, it's not enough from the Rundfunk Museum, the Radio Museum in Germany, written by my father and a journalist, about the PAL color televisions. It's more general, not so much the circuit boards. So I'd like to give you a general picture out of the life of my father. I personally IV, and this is a completely different story. Came to television. Let me first go on here. Is it okay? This is in and most of my relatives were pharmacists or clergymen or medical doctors. So my father really was the first one who was a genius in technology. Yeah. This is an early picture of my father standing here in the high school, because he didn't go to the classes. He went always to the German museum in Munich, born out of the school system. So the only thing he could do later, get some education in a very well engineering school in Saxony, where you see him here, and where he got his basic education. This picture here shows a museum which we helped to create in this small town of Saxony called Mittweida, where this engineering school still exists. And during his student time, he worked on television in a horse stable, which is reproduced here in this museum, where my mother and I donated quite some money and also a lot of material for my father. Other material, large collection. If you are in Munich at the Deutsche Museum, there's a large collection about the things my father collected during his life. So this is how he started with television as a student, because we had a discussion going into technology and really admire the things which our technology, which we have today, is based on. This picture shows my father and his first assignment with an Hungarian scientist, Dennis von Mihaly, in Berlin, who had a private technology laboratory in Berlin on television. But at that time, you can see this is Dennis von Mihaly, It's a mechanical system, it's not an electronic system yet. And my father also contributed to this laboratory. Fortunately, later he could switch to a company, Telefunken, till his retirement. You see, I admired some of your older television cameras. This camera, this is my father there, who built this in a very short amount of time for the Olympic Games in 1936. And the technology came, of course, from the US, from Zworykin, who allowed Telefunken to rebuild his ionoscope type of devices. So that was the first of these devices which Telefunken had built, following instruction from Zworykin. But you can see the huge optics there. Why such a heavy system? Because the ionoscope was very insensitive to light. The photo elements were not optimized like we have them today. So it's a very heavy system that's during the Olympic Games. He got an award for this technology from Hitler, but he also got an award for a cruise, but he never made this cruise because my parents were not supporters of that type of regime. The next thing, I think a little earlier, my father was faster than you with your New York, was it New York? Yeah. World Fair. This was in World Fair 1937. You can see him here, and here's his camera. This was really a world presentation of television in Paris. It was not so easy at that time to have the fortune to be in a foreign country, because at that time most people couldn't travel anymore for political reasons. So, but this was really a world success here with his smaller camera at that time. In Germany, unfortunately, television was not as widespread as in the United States, but he created also the first electronic television studio in the world, which was dedicated only to some elite type of people or military personnel at that time. But television at that time was confined to military applications. Here you see the Peenemünde type of rocket starts. My father created here a television system to conduct the pictures for these rocket starts on different levels. And you see cables here with low resistance. That was also something completely new at that time. And here was the tower for the political establishment at that time. He was the only civilian and was not wearing a military type of uniform. My father also with von Arden, and the first exhibit in Berlin on television, his colleagues all in brown uniforms, my father and von Arden in lab coats. That meant some courage at that time. But here the only civilian, of course, famous people there, Dornberger and then von Braun, who later came to the US, where he recorded these first recordings. Of course, a lot of these first rockets exploded before they really could lift off. Then there's the picture I have here on the beginning after the war. The situation in Germany was my father had a passport. He could not be drawn to the military. This saved his life. And because the Russians thought he was a physician, physicist, and physician, they couldn't distinguish. So he had to create a hospital for those ladies who tried to kill themselves after exposures to Russian soldiers. But then the Russians found the intelligent engineers in other areas one couldn't work after the war. Fortunately, when they deported most of the families to Russia, and also all the equipment, the reason is that we don't have so much in the museums is because the Russians took everything to Moscow and these towns. They didn't have television there at that time, but they took everything they could. So we survived because we were living in the English sector, and then my father was unemployed for nearly 5 years before he could have a start again in, not in Berlin then, but in Hanover with the company Telefunken. So this was his first television set after the Second World War. My father was like this Peter Goldberg or Goldstein, who said he was a maverick inventor. He was a maverick inventor. He had 100 patents before the World War ended, and then 60s afterwards. So he had hundreds of patents. And his colleagues said if he would be confined in a room with enough electrical parts, he could come out with a television set. This was his colleague said, so you see him in his type of designs. Of course, at that time, vacuum tubes were already replaced by solid-state elements. Very early in his career in Hanover, he started working also in new methods and published a lot of patents, and in particular also on digital sound. And after he had the possibility to come to the United States in his early 50s and then admire American television from the NTSC system, which could incorporate black and white television and color television. In Germany, we later said never twice the same color, because he realized that you had to adjust these television sets to optimize them, but when the phases were changing or the weather conditions were changing. So this is one of the early patents he filed based on American inventions, and he his company favored the Steckham system, which was originally based on the patents of a French gentleman from the Alsace, Henri de France, and but later changed their mind. So my father had a large laboratory, but then later his laboratory was reduced for specific tasks, and then he created all these new systems. He had a laboratory where he could record and also send out signals from the American system, the French system, and then systems which were then couldn't be named the Bruchs, the Bruch system, because it means to break, and it wasn't the right name, so they came up with the name PAL, phase alternation line, because the idea was that the phases between the different lines were switched to an upper phase and a lower switch, and then they could be tested all the time and could be adjusted according to those changes which occur naturally in the recording. So this is one of the early patents, and then he did much more. And here you see outside his laboratory, here we see Deutsche Bundespost, and here's Telefunken, where they did field measurements on his system in 1963, historic gatherings, where he, without really the direct, he just at meetings in Hanover had shown his own systems, and people were so enthusiastic about it, so that suddenly France, who had spent hundreds of millions of dollars and politically was very strong with Charles de Gaulle, who strongly supported French technology. Suddenly the French had a competitor with a rather small laboratory. Against all these resistance and political influence, most of the countries then selected his PAL system, or the systems, there are several, and in 1967 Germany started with the PAL system. Here the Willy Brandt, at that time foreign minister of the German government, was pushing this type of switch. Here I had the same thing in my laboratory, a price to $2 to ignite time in Germany. So that was a great success. He then became very famous, dozens of awards. This is myself there. My father with some of the highest awards. And this is an interesting political thing you see here. And deliver color television to the Italians, but it didn't work out. So later they said my father and his engineers had detuned the antennas, of course, which was not true. So finally PAL succeeded in Italy, and here's from Mr. Kohl, former Chancellor, a letter to the Italian minister. So of course it was political, because the money which could be made with licenses was huge, right? Because so that was one of the successes, because my father was capable, he was an excellent engineer, and he could, even with smaller manpower, made excellent presentations which convinced most of the countries. The Russians had no choice because Charles de Gaulle was so strong and influenced them dramatically that even then East Germany had to take the second system. Here's another figure, my mother and my father. receiving the Werner von Siemens, I think, one of the highest awards you can accomplish in Germany, together with von Braun, who had already cancer and could not personally attend, but still remembered my father's presence in Peenemünde when he did these television recordings for the political establishment at that time. This is one of the awards. I think here in the book they're all listed. There are dozens, also very high awards in the United Kingdom. Now I'm coming to the next generation, and my mother, when she became 90, a picture here, because my mother and I donated a lot of money and material to different institutions, of course in Germany. This is my mother when she became 90. My father died with 82. But there were recently anniversary, 100th birthday of my father, and my son gave an interview in the German television because I couldn't go because I had to teach at my university. So this is my son. But we have these problems with this generation. I feel it all the time when I have to give lectures about physics, basic physics, to engineers and scientists. There's actually no understanding anymore about the basics of our technology. They just use all these gadgets. They don't know where they come from. They have no ideas how they function. That's surprising. I mean, that's what can we do? We have to live with that situation, but sometimes I also feel there's a lack of really, it's not that what my father did, got on the junkyard when he was young to find a motor out of maybe type of other machine and then start to put something together. That's something which that generation did. And to create something nowadays, people want to do only modeling, particularly the engineers, I feel that way. They love to design things on the computer and then never really produce the prototypes to demonstrate that really that their modeling bears really a result. So that's something. I'm not an engineer, but when I go to some meetings sometimes where I'm invited also with engineers, it's not the same generation like what you have done in your use, that you were able to build things and demonstrate it to mankind. So this is the book which came out. Walter Bruch, Eines Menschen Leben, the life of a human being. Here you can see him in different age groups. It just came out, was printed from the engineering school in Saxony, Mittweida, where also the museum is. And the last thing, there's something also Edison could have said, because my father, after this retirement, did a lot of television series about history of science and had also a very large collection, which partially exists in Munich in the Deutsche Museum. Said this key to the success for the next generation of engineers, but you have to have some luck and the right idea at the right time. And I hope that in this country where I'm living now for 25 years, that we have more ideas and also some luck, to support our industries which really need new ideas. And
an excellent presentation. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to take a break. However, I want to tell you a story first. The story, we still have 6 minutes. No. Did you have questions of Dr. Bruch? Go ahead. Go ahead.
What is the exact translation of the German there?
It's not an exact, it means about success is done through a lot of hard work.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Success has to be done with a lot of hard work, and then also you have to have the goals to go in the right direction, and you must have also luck, and the right idea. Edison could have said something similar, I would guess. Yes?
The first time I went behind the Iron Curtain, went to Hungarian television, but in the studios, all of the equipment is PAL. Because you can't switch, you can't edit
Yeah.
CCAM.
Yes.
So they have to do it in PAL. It's only the transmitters that are CCAM. And almost everybody's television sets were by system, PAL or
Yeah, that's true, although it was forbidden, everybody did it, yeah. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, in their television sets, yeah. 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 Of course, Germany, West Germany built television stations very close to the border, that they could form a democratic republic. But my father also had, I have a picture with me, a Russian patent on PAL. It also exists.
One more question.
It's the same color. CCAM means system essentially contrary to the American method.
Yeah. But your system was very ingenious, and the United States made a huge effort to present with a huge amount of equipment in the early 1951, as I understand. And you have done most of the work. My father just was able to complement that method and to build on that technology. Without that work, he couldn't have been so successful.
There's some more interest, Joel.
Yeah.
Another anecdote. I'm a witness of a called television, so we've done a lot of research on it.
Yeah.
And one very interesting thing we found out is that in the beginning there was excellent cooperation among television.
Yeah, that's true.
Going in.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
All wanted to sell French stuff, and do those students offered them CCAM for free. And as the
That's true, yeah.
they got $200 million for Thompson test equipment. They never paid for it. Charles got screwed. And by the way, I'm French. So
Yeah. That's true. So it's more than a wonder that Germany then switched, yeah, big, but
another thing too is that aside from the initial lab, all production was done in PAL.
yeah. I think the problem was there was a conference in Moscow about what should be done, yeah, and they were not informed, so they were shocked. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, so my father was lucky maybe at that time. Seeable. By the way, there's one patent which came out earlier than the RCA camera with the three Einzel lenses and with the pattern with these holes. There was a German guy in 1943 published a patent on the same thing, but it was war in Germany. Probably nobody realized the invention with these wonderful TV tubes you have produced. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. I'm going to try to amuse you for a moment. I'm going to tell you a story that I call My Encounters with Early Color TV. Now, turn back the clock, 1947, I'm a high school student in New York and Brooklyn. And I'm tinkering. I had a bunch of ham operator friends. They were trying to teach me ham radio. I got up to about 4 words a minute, and I said, this is crazy. I can never make it. Okay. But they taught me enough to make little amplifiers and play with radios and stuff. And it was very interesting. 1947, the RCA truck shows up, drops off 3 cartons in my living room. I said, what is that? Wait till your father comes home. He'll tell you about it. Well, the first box had a 630, the second box had a 10BP4, and the third box had the stand. The engineers came the next day, set the thing up, first in the apartment house. Everybody came down. My mother opened the doors, and we had a party for I don't know how long, constantly. And I was still tinkering, and I read Radio Electronics magazine. And in it was an article, how to get color on your black and white TV set. And I didn't know nothing about TV, and I said, how interesting. You get a color picture. Okay. They had a schematic, how to modify a 630 chassis to pick up the CBS experimental broadcasts that were probably coming out of the Chrysler building after the station went off the air. Okay. I got enough resistors and condensers, and yes, we called them condensers back in 1948. They weren't caps yet. You still do. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I got these group of stuff together from my ham radio friends. I got the schematic and the details on how to convert the chassis, the circuitry. Out the cabinet, put it on my desk in my room, locked the door, soldering iron out, boom, 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 put a lot of stuff in, took me I don't know how long. Put the set back together, turned it on, and I got a scrambled something. It was supposed to be the CBS experimental test pattern from New York. Well, I twiddled the vertical, the horizontal, and the back of the 630, they had the horizontal frequency adjustment. Twiddled that, and boom, I get a picture. But it wasn't a full screen picture, it was a quad picture. 4 little pictures. I didn't know what the hell to do now. Had no idea what I was doing. Put the set back together. Afraid to say something. Friday night, the next night after dinner, Dad says, I'm going to watch the Friday night fights. He turns on the set, sees scrambled eggs, blows his top, figures out I did it. Calls the RCA service company, takes a week, they put it back together again. Okay, that was my first encounter with color television. Now, I go to college. One day, like all college students, I said, I'm bored, I'm going to cut class. Well, my favorite haunt to cut class was the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, which is a world-class science museum. Interactive exhibits, everything you ever wanted to see. So, take my 2 buses, get down there, and I'm walking down the corridor in front of the auditorium, and I just about trip over these big, fat, black cables coming in the street door to the back of the auditorium. A couple of them. What the heck is going on? And the door to the auditorium was, you know, ajar a little bit to let the cables in. And here I had the curious fella, and I stick my head in, and my jaw drops. I look around, and on the stage, I see what is a bunch of television sets. They were strange-looking television sets, and I said, oh my God, I got to get closer. What is this? So the technicians are walking in the door carrying all sorts of stuff. I take off my coat, throw my books in the corner of the hallway, go to the front door. Hey, Charlie, can I help you with your baggage? You know, oh, yeah, son, yeah, take it. I get into the auditorium, standing in front of the stage, and I said, these are science fiction machines. Big round circles. But there's color coming out of them. In my mind's eye, now this happened in 1951, a long time ago. I'm getting a little old, my memory. There were color bars on some, there were pictures on others. Now it dawned on me when thinking, they were probably coming from either a microwave truck or a film chain in the truck or a generator in the truck. Experimental signals, we found out later, were coming from New York and Washington, probably by microwave to Philadelphia for demonstration. And by God, what I think in recreating history, this must have been one of the FCC shootouts between RCA and CBS Color. Aside from the color wheel, which we all know, and we've got a couple of them running loose in the museum, that you're all familiar with, there was this one set that didn't have the color wheel, as we call it. It had a television set inside a squirrel cage where the color gelatins went around the set, either from front to back or back to front. And I didn't remember this. I called John Folsom a couple of weeks ago, and I said, am I crazy, John? He says, no, there was a set like that. Now, I saw the set. I couldn't describe it to you today and tell you exactly what it was. Now, that was my second encounter with color television. I was a journalism major and a business major, and I got an assignment one day to write an editorial. And what kind of editorial? This is 1951. And I said, well, television stuff that I knew nothing about. And I wrote an editorial in 1951. How do I remember it's 1951? After Thanksgiving last year, I hired a couple of out-of-work landscapers that were not working. We cleaned out my attic. 55 years of family accumulations. In the stuff that we didn't throw to the dump, my wife found a bunch of my journalism stuff from school. And in it was the paper, two papers I wrote on the color war between CBS and RCA. And I said, something is strange here. Basically, no homeowner in their right mind would put a big circular wheel in their living room to watch color television, and it'll never work. And then I read an article in the paper where Alan B. Dumont was designing a color wheel for the Sovereign. And again, when I called Folsom, I said, is that true? He says, yeah, I've been looking for one for 30 years. I got a Sovereign. I want to put a color wheel in front of it. So my editorial said basically in 1951, who would allow a 7-wheel color set in their living room? So that was another encounter with color television. Now, fast forward a little bit, 1958, I go to work at the National Broadcasting Company, not in the technical side. I've very minor knowledge of technical. I was a more creative guy, developing television programmings and stuff like that, and we had offices, and when I went to work, all our offices had these television sets with small picture tubes, which I realized later on in life, they were CT100s. I couldn't figure out why the NBC engineer was crawling around the offices a couple of times a week on his hands and knees tweaking, and then running up to the 65th floor to General Sarnoff's office to tweak his color set, because none of them stayed. None of them really worked. And, but the color was brilliant. Studio quality, color signals, first generation from the camera, from the film chain, from whatever. Man, it was pure Technicolor gorgeous. Now, I didn't get crazy about the color sets then. Stayed working for many years. In the early 80s when I started to retire, I said, gee, those color sets really, they caught my eye, piqued my fancy. I said, I got to have one. So, again, another encounter. I started looking for CT100s on eBay, on here and there, and Saturday morning, I see an eBay ad. 3 CT100s for sale on eBay. Now, the guy was an 85-year-old retired RC engineer that worked in the Lancaster plant. And he worked in the RCA service company, whether in Princeton or wherever it was. And he made a mistake of putting his telephone number to $100. And I said, no, there's something wrong here. I called him up. He says, oh, I'm too busy. My friend put the ad in. I said, I want to come down and see the sets and give you some money. I was just very positive. He says, I got to go shopping. I said, when are you coming back? He says, 12 o'clock. Now, this is Trenton, New Jersey. So I call a couple of my friends. We get in my empty van. We drive to Trenton. I park in front of his row house. Go in. Didn't really want to see us. If I tell you this house was a museum, he had color sets in every bloody room of the house. The bedroom, all of what happened, and I learned from the old gypsy rug peddlers how to handle it. I sat down and I said, Michael, there's some nice stuff here. I know you worked hard to accumulate it. And I threw $3,000 on the table in cash. And his hand started to work towards the $3,000. I knew I had him. So he says, well, what do you want? I said, those 3 CT100s. He says, well, I had a lot more stuff in the basement. We go down the basement. He had a couple of spare 15Gs. There was an amazing amount of stuff. He gave spare parts. He had CT55s up in the bedroom. In order to get some of the stuff down from the second floor, we had to take the railings off because we couldn't get anything out of this house. It took us till 6 o'clock at night to get everything out. He thanked me for the money. I thanked him for the sets. When I got home and I put the sets out, I couldn't fit the tops on the 3 stuff out of the basement. Oh my God. Take it apart. You better recap it. Don't play with it anymore. Well, it took a couple of years to get it going. And then Stan Jacobs, who was sitting in the corner there, calls me one day and he says, I'm cleaning out a house that belonged to a NASA engineer. There may be a CT100 there. You want to come down and cherry pick. It's mine, but I'll sell it to you. So I went down. I got a CT100. I got a practically brand new 15G. A bunch of stuff. And Stan picked up a NASA color camera that we realized had a color wheel in it that they were using in the rockets, because it was easier to send color down on one channel than 3 tubes and whatever. That was a great find. So I wound up with an extra CT100. Then Harry Poster sent me a CT100 that worked. I found another picture tube, and I said, no, I got enough. I got a Sylvania 15. That's old. Harry Poster has another CT100 chassis in parts. I buy it from him. I needed a wiring harness. I called Pete. He had it out of a chassis. I needed cages. Fred Hoffman sent me the cages. Now I said, I recapped it. Kirk Stankiewicz put it on his test jig and said, my God, you got color. He says, we got to keep restoring the set. Now I had one spare 15G left in inventory. So what am I going to do with it? I needed a cabinet. I called Steve. I gave him a modest donation. He shipped me a parts cabinet. I refinished it, had everything there. 2 knobs are missing. Called Jeff Lindaro. He sent me 2 knobs, the convergence knob and the focus knob. Got the set working. It's sitting there in the laboratory, as they say, and I have no room for it, so it's going to be for sale. But the point is, my close encounters with color television have lasted since 1947. Most of the time, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So good luck to you fortune hunters. You know, at my age, I stopped crawling around and fixing automobiles, which was another hobby that most of you had. Fixing TV sets. I got too many shocks for my cardiac parts to take anymore. I can't do it. So good luck to all of you, and I hope you have better luck than I had in most cases. I'm still working on it. Because, now don't laugh, I still have my father's 630 working with the original CRT in the lineup. And I didn't know better. I thought I was going to get color. But my fear is, and that's why when I found out about the museum and Steve and all you great collectors and joined this so-called fraternity here, we're doing good things for ourselves, for each other, for history. I fear for the next 2 generations who are going to say, what the hell do we need that junk for? Put it back in the landfill where I think these guys got it from. And that's it. So now take a break. You have 15 minutes to bother your neighbor, and then we're going to come back. And thanks, Jerome.
What was your initial purchase of the 3?
The 3 must have been 86.